Hello everybody, DSS here, and today I'm going to be showing you an exploit that uses the Adamantoise in Final Fantasy 15. The version I'm playing on is PS4, but I'm assuming this works on both versions of the game. So before we get started, I do want to point out this very important first step. Park your Regalia at this outpost. I'll explain why when we get there, but before you activate the hunt that involves the Adamantoise, make sure that you have your Regalia parked at this outpost that you see displayed on the map. Now, to explain a little bit on what's going to be going on here, the Adamantoise mission is quite a bit different from the other hunts that you do in the game. And this hunt in particular, once you get things started up, you'll notice that this small cutscene plays out and the mountain then comes to life, and it's this giant turtle known as the Adamantoise. The thing is, the game restricts you quite a bit when this hunt is activated. There is this, I don't really want to say barrier, it's more like this invisible trigger that surrounds the area to make sure that you don't go too far away from the Adamantoise. In the event that you touch this trigger at any point, the Adamantoise will go back into hiding and the mission will be aborted. Now, there is another way for the mission to be aborted. That is, if you start the fight and then end the fight by leaving the area before finishing the Adamantoise off. We're going to actually be using that to our advantage, because one of the things that the game does not allow you to do is fast travel. And the reason why it doesn't let you fast travel in the scenario where the Adamantoise is out and about is because that would allow you to bypass the trigger that would normally prevent you from leaving pretty much this enclosed area that you see me circling. You got about that much area to mess around with when it comes to the Adamantoise being out and about. However, I do have a method that's going to allow us to get the ability to fast travel back. And all you have to do is follow the steps that you're going to be seeing on the screen in order to get that to happen. Now, to talk a little bit about why we're going to be doing this, is a number of interesting things that you might find outside of the area that the game tries to restrict you to when the Adamantoise is out. But one of the things that I found specifically already is that when the Adamantoise is out, a lot of enemies are removed from the game and don't spawn, including in dungeons, also the sealed dungeons. Enemies just simply will not show up. So when you make it over to the Adamantoise, here's what you want to do. You can go ahead and jump off of your chocobo. I usually just point warp around, but you want to be making your way over to where the Regalia is. While the Adamantoise is out, the game does not allow you to save manually. However, there are a number of auto saves in the game, and we're going to be taking advantage of one of those, which is at the outpost that your Regalia should be parked at right now. Takes a little while to make it over there. If you don't jump over your chocobo, assuming the Adamantoise doesn't inflict any damage on you, you can stay on the chocobo and just ride across, but instead I'm going to warp strike. I'm going to show you exactly what I do to make sure that I have adequate time to make it to the Regalia before the Adamantoise completely goes back into its mountain-like state. I get about right here near the edge of where the fight would end. Focus on the Adamantoise and wait for a flash. When it flashes, that means it's about to attack, and when it attacks, it has to finish the attack before it starts to go back inside of the mountain-like state. So once you get out of here, immediately go over to the Regalia, hit manual. You're going to get into your vehicle, and when you get into the vehicle, immediately hop back out. If you notice in the top left corner, the game saved. Now, the goal here is to have the game save before the Adamantoise goes back into hiding. I'm going to actually let it go back into hiding so that you can see what happens. If it goes back into hiding, you get this message saying that the hunt is aborted because the Adamantoise has gone back into his mountain-like state. As long as you got the game to save prior to that message popping up, everything should be a-okay. As long as you wait for an attack to start before you make your way to the Regalia, you should have more than enough time to make it there, into the Regalia, exit out of Regalia, and then have the game autosave. Now, at this stage of the game, you have 2 autosave slots. should be able to tell which one is the appropriate save. You can just tell by the mission title. So between these two is the top one. It tells you by the rest area that you're at, and you have enough information to know which save you need to load up. If you do load up the wrong save, no big deal. Just load up your other autosave and everything should be fine. Now, that's only I would say the first half. That's technically the hard part. If you get that part down, you should be good. The rest is very simple, and you'll see exactly how that works. But what's going to happen here is when this autosave loads up, the Adamantoise fight is going to start back up. Despite the fact that when the save was being made, the Adamantoise was going back into his mountain-like state, the game only saves the fact that the hunt is active. So as long as that hunt is active, whenever you load a save that has the Adamantoise out and about, it depends. Sometimes you're able to move around, sometimes you're not able to move around. In this case, I'm not able to move around, but that's because the game is just getting things back into the state where the Adamantoise is out to play. And from there, we're actually going to be heading over to the nearest dungeon. That dungeon is located over here, because thankfully that dungeon is not so far out that the game will say, hey, what are you doing out there? We need to end this mission because you're not actually trying to fight this thing. Now, the whole reasoning for trying to get to that position that I was at for the autosave is, if you notice, we're actually behind the Adamantoise now. They set up the detection on the Adamantoise in such a fashion that you're not really able to make it behind it without it detecting you. And even if you were able to make it behind it, as you can see, the fight is going to initiate, and then when the fight ends, that pretty much sets you up in such a fashion that the Adamantoise starts going back into his mountain-like state, and when that happens, the hunt is aborted. It's pretty much to prevent you from breaking anything. Which, I mean, it's done pretty well. It could have been done better, but it was done pretty well. So now that we're actually behind the Adamantoise, we're going to make our way over to the dungeon. And the reason why we're going to make it over to the dungeon is because this is actually what's going to allow us to get our ability to use some key features in the overworld, like returning to a rest point, returning to the vehicle, and even the ability to fast travel. So once you get into this dungeon, all you need to do is run up to this elevator, just kind of brush up against the door. You don't have to actually go in there. And you'll notice that now when I bring up the map, I have the ability to return to rest point and return to car. Now, normally, well, I don't want to say normally, but in a lot of cases, if you're venturing too far, whether it be from a fast travel or returning to a car, returning to a rest point, whatever it may be, then you'll reset the Adamantoise fight. However, if you're doing the same setup that I've done, you can return to the car safely without the Adamantoise fight resetting, because every time the Adamantoise fight resets, so do the properties that it brings along with it. Now, once you get back to the vehicle, you want to select auto and map point, and you can pretty much pick any location out here that you can fast travel to. The whole thing that you want to avoid doing is fast traveling to anything that is inside where the Adamantoise would normally spawn. So you don't really want to pick anything in here. You can pick this fast travel, by the way. This parking spot right here. This one does work if you want to check out this dungeon. But I'm going to go to the Chocobo post just so that you have something to reference if you're going to follow this video exactly as I've done so. So let's go to the Chocobo post, and it's going to ask us, do you want to fast travel? And yes, I do want to fast travel. And there you go. That is how you successfully make it out of the area that the game tries to restrict you to when the Adamantoise is actually showing up. Now, to wrap up this video, I'm going to throw out a few things, and if there's anything additional, it'll be in the description. But two important things you should know if you want to mess around with this exploit and, test some things out. The first thing is, whenever the Adamantoise fight reloads, which will oftentimes be indicated by the loading that you currently see on the screen. If you ever see the game loading and the bar pretty much expanding to the right, then that means that the fight is going to be reset. Whenever the Adamantoise fight is reset, the properties that come along with it also come back into play. So whenever that happens, I recommend just finding the nearest dungeon, entering the dungeon, and then exiting the dungeon. That'll give you the ability to save the game, return the car, return the rest point, you know, all of that good stuff. Because until you do that, you won't be able to save the game outside of autosaves. You won't be able to return to car. You won't be able to return to rest point and things like that. Specifically in the Chocobo Post area, or the Chocobo area, whatever you want to say, if you do any race that's across the street, that will also give you the ability to save the game and return to rest point and stuff like that. So you're going to see the Adamantoise fight pop back up again, things like that. But that's one thing. The other thing is, if you are ever in a battle, do not, unless you're testing something out, do not use any techniques. If you use a technique, the character is going to go over to where the Adamantoise is, and provided that the technique is one that also involves Noct will be teleported over there as well. So you definitely want to make sure that you avoid that. But just for the sake of showing you what I mean, because the Adamantoise fight did get reloaded, you will notice that I can't return the rest point, return the car, I can't save the game, stuff like that. If you enter a dungeon and then exit a dungeon, all of that should return. But in addition to that, if you do come over to this region that I did come to, you can also just start up a race. And if you start up a race and then end the race, you will get all of those key features back. And I would recommend, actually, after doing that, to go ahead and save the game. Even though when I came to the Chocobo Post, there was an autosave, this will give you a manual save, and you can make this be your backup save file for whenever you want to mess around with dungeons or see what NPCs are still out there that you can interact with, things like that. I messed around with this a little bit, but I feel like there's a lot more that I can mess around with this in particular. And if you do mess around with this yourself, feel free to comment on this video if you find anything interesting that you may want to share with other people who will be watching this video. But yeah, as you can see, after doing the race, now I can save my game. I can return the rest point, return the car, all that good stuff. Now, I will say that I have tested 2 dungeons myself. And in those 2 dungeons that I've gone into, after going behind the sealed door, there were 0 enemy encounters until I got to the final room behind both of those sealed doors. The beauty of that is you don't have to fight any enemies, but the items that appear in each room do stay there. They are there for you to pick up. Enemies in the overworld and enemies in dungeons typically will not show up. That's not the case in all scenarios, but in most scenarios, the enemies will not show up. And that makes the dungeon's a lot easier, really. And even if you just want to run back through the dungeon and collect items because maybe there was a really good pool of items in one of the dungeons that you went into behind a sealed door, maybe in the main dungeon itself, this is a really easy way to just kind of rush through, not to worry about enemies, especially if you're max level, don't really benefit from the experience and things of that nature. So I'm going to be messing around with this quite a bit, see if I can find anything else more interesting, but there you go. That's the gist of it. That is the Adamantoise exploit that I came across. Really cool to look at. Really cool to mess around with. And there you go. I mean, it's there for you all to enjoy as well. So, I hope you enjoyed the video. Take it easy. Until next time. Peace out.